Welcome to episode 2 of Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobbie Holmes. I just wanted to start off by thanking everyone for all the love and support I received when launching my first episode. You're just so sweet. I was pretty excited to see I have my first international listener, so shout out to whoever is listening in Denmark. That made me so happy. But if you like what you're hearing, please share the episodes or leave a review. It really helps. Today, I'm going to be talking about the disappearance of Susan Cox Powell. And she is not the only victim in this story, which you will find out as the story goes on. This case caught national media attention, but I currently live in Utah, and it was especially publicized here locally. I wasn't living here when this went down, but since Susan is still considered a missing person, it is still a widely discussed case. The main person of interest in her disappearance is her husband, Josh Powell. I say person of interest because I don't know if the term suspect was used in this case, given that Susan was never found and there's no evidence to support a murder. However, Josh Powell did it. There is no freaking doubt in anyone's mind. This man murdered her and hid her body. This case has so much information. I feel like I could do an entire episode on how shitty of a person Josh Powell is and his abuse on Susan, but I'm going to try to fit it all into one episode. I want to talk a little bit about Josh's life leading up to meeting Susan. So let's start with his parents. I know divorce can be messy and really cause an effect on the children involved, but this case in particular takes it to a new level. Josh's parents, Stephen and Teresa, or Terry, they had 5 children together. Terry had a strong standing with the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints faith, where at the point I'm starting this story, Stephen has a strong hatred for the religion. So I'm not sure how they ended up together, with such a strong opposition on the topic, but maybe they were both members of the church in the beginning and Stephen strayed or was excommunicated. I can't really find information stating one way or the other. You'll find out as I go on. This is a journal-keeping family. I had a journal in high school talking about boy crushes and whatnot, but I didn't realize so many adults kept journals. Susan keeps a journal, Stephen keeps a journal, and Josh keeps a creepy audio journal. But they were actually all very helpful when trying to piece together this case. When Josh was 5 years old, Terry found Stephen's journal. She found out he had a secret life, one where he was having an affair, and not just an affair, but a straight-up infatuation of another woman. He even stalked her, and he had a camcorder that he used a lot, and he was videotaping this woman. When Terry confronted him, he told her that he believed he should be able to bear a second wife. Polygamy is legal again in Utah, guys, as of 2020. It has most definitely been a crazy year. I'm ready for 2021. He also shared with his young children that, quote, people are just animals and should be able to have sex with whoever they want. He shared pornography with his sons. So obviously Terry disagreed with these parenting choices of Stephen. And if this isn't weird and creepy enough, he also had a journal entry that he stated he was actually physically attracted to his oldest daughter, Jennifer. He wrote that she would walk around in her t-shirt and panties and it drove him crazy, which is freaking sick. When Josh was a child, he reportedly killed his younger sister's gerbil and made her touch its blood, which we all know is a red flag. Kids killing animals, there's a problem there. And we all have heard this as a warning sign of serial killers, so I decided to do some research. And there's 2 different theories about kids killing animals that I think could pertain to Josh in particular. There's one that's called rehearsal for interpersonal violence. meaning practicing on a stray animal or pet before actually engaging in the violent act on a human, or it could be a vehicle for emotional abuse. The example given there is injuring a sibling's pet to frighten the sibling, which I think either one could honestly go for Josh Powell because he did end up killing Susan, and he becomes the master of emotional abuse. Another instance that shows how unstable Josh is, one time Terry asked him to do the dishes, and Josh threatened her with a butcher's knife. And there's also record of a suicide attempt in his early teenage years. Unfortunately, well, probably fortunately, they don't sound like they should have been together, but Stephen and Terry ended up filing for divorce. One day, Josh returned home to be surprised by his mom. She had planned somewhat of a intervention, I guess. She was there with his uncles and his bishop. A bishop is the leader of the LDS ward. And Terry let Josh know that she was going to be keeping the house, and he was welcome to stay there with her, but there were going to be some new rules that he had to follow. There was going to be an 11 p.m. curfew, no swearing or crude talk, and no R-rated movies. If you break any of these rules, Mom reserves the right to throw you out. And there was a spot at the bottom where they wanted him to actually sign this document. Josh was like, screw that. I'll just go live with my dad. Josh did not like rules or structure, and with Stephen, there were no rules. Stephen bashed Terry in custody battles, saying that she was part of a religious cult and was practicing witchcraft, which was really more just like she made her own tinctures and teas. I mean, it's not like she was casting spells on anyone. No witchcraft involved. He just didn't like the fact that she was so religious. That's his main issue. Terry ended up getting custody of the children, but Josh and John were allowed to choose which parent they wanted to live with, and they chose Stephen. When Josh was a senior in high school, Stephen moved him and John to Washington State, where he eventually attended the University of Washington. In college, he refrained from drinking and smoking, and he had a few interesting girls, but it faded quickly when he saw how they acted. He believed girls should act a certain way. He didn't like it when girls went out dancing at clubs because dancing was reserved for an intimate partner, so it was not meant to be done with strangers. And he didn't like it. He didn't think women should go drinking in bars. It's not very ladylike. So after that school year ended, he moved back in with Terry. He felt the lack of religion in Stephen's life, and he wanted to try to mend the relationship with his mother. If you hear that clickety-clacky, that is my dog walking across the tile floor because my studio is also my kitchen table. Okay, yes, he wanted to mend the relationship with his mother. So Terry guided him back into the LDS faith. He ended up meeting a girl at the local LDS ward. Her name is Catherine, and I am going to call her the lucky one that got away. They started dating, and the relationship moved fast. They ended up moving in together. Josh became very possessive and controlling of Catherine. He insisted that she apply for a student loan, and once that loan was received, Josh took it and he deposited it into his account. And Catherine never saw that money. And this was just the beginning of his abuse regarding money restrictions. Catherine said he was controlling in many ways. She quoted, "I had restrictions and limitations on what I could and could not do when it came to my family. If I was going to visit them, he had to come too. I couldn't go by myself. Things got out of control." Catherine was able to get away to Seattle to visit a friend, and she decided not to return. She broke up with Josh over the phone. So good for you, Catherine. You got away because you could have been Susan. I don't even like saying that. Josh became active in church events where people took turns hosting dinner parties at their house. The night he hosted a party at his apartment is where he first met Susan Cox. At the end of the party, she volunteered to do dishes together, and they ended up sharing their first kiss. She knew he was the one. Insert barf noise here. Susan was 19 years old, and Josh was 23. At this time, Susan was attending cosmetology school, and she was working part-time at JCPenney's jewelry counter. Josh was already deep in debt. Even with the money stolen from his previous girlfriend, Catherine, Josh tended to buy what he wanted when he wanted it, and he used credit cards, racking up more and more debt. He loved RC toys, computers, electronics, cameras, the works. Once Josh decided to propose, he convinced Susan to use her discount at JCPenney to purchase a very modest engagement ring, to which he promised to pay her back. They were dating 6 months before they were married, which I know sounds really fast, but I can tell you that that is somewhat the norm in this area. Josh and Susan's wedding ceremony was held in the LDS temple. Only those in good standing with the church are allowed to enter. So Stephen, obviously not in good standing, he tried to force his way into the temple, and he was withheld. He had to wait outside with the children, so the children couldn't go in either because if you hadn't yet been baptized, you're not allowed in the temple. Their marriage began with the couple renting an apartment together. They ended up having a falling out with the landlord and were actually evicted, and they sought help from Josh's father, Stephen. Even though there really wasn't room in the house for the newlyweds, they kind of made do. They made the best of the situation. They just added a sheet in the living room to kind of make a little wall divider so they could have their own space. While they were living with Stephen, he became obsessed with Susan. He constantly had the camcorder on, videoing her every move. He even took photos of her while she was in the bathroom. Susan was weirded out by her father-in-law, but tolerated the behavior in hopes that it was only temporary and they would have their own house soon. But Josh had trouble keeping a job. He didn't do well with direction, and he tended to think he knew better than his boss in just about every situation. Josh and Susan ended up moving to Yakima, Washington, and they worked together managing an assisted living home. They were able to live on site there, which helped them a lot that they didn't have to pay rent. They were able to help pay down Josh's debt so they could eventually buy their own home. While living in Yakima, Stephen still continued to visit pretty regularly, even though he wasn't all that close. During one visit, he gave Susan a shoulder and foot massage. And Susan messed up here. Like, she should not have allowed this to happen, especially if she can tell that he's infatuated with her. I mean, I feel like that's something you can pick up on, but Stephen took this as an erotic moment between them. She was 21 and he was 53. I would personally never want or allow my father-in-law to do such a thing to me, but I'm hoping she had innocent intentions here. And this is just gross. After returning home, Stephen set up his video camera. So this is his video journal, I guess. He started undressing himself and described in explicit detail about the experience. Once again, Josh thought of a new career change. He was going to try driving big rig trucks. So Stephen met him and Susan for his first attempt at test driving. And apparently he was going to be gone a while. So Stephen offered to Susan that he would go ahead and give her a ride back home to her parents' house, to which she accepted. Stephen had his camcorder as usual when Susan was around. And when they got back in the car, he thought he turned it off, but I guess he had accidentally left it on during the ride. And so there wasn't any video, but he did capture audio of the whole conversation. He took this opportunity while they were alone to start professing his love to Susan. And if you hear the conversation, it's crazy. He goes on for a solid 5 minutes telling her that he loves her and that they have this connection. And it's just silence on the other end. Susan's saying nothing. And finally, she just says, "I don't know where you're coming from with this. I'm married to your son, which makes me a step below your children. And that's where I'm comfortable." Stephen was devastated by Susan's rejection. Susan told Josh about what happened, and he was furious with Stephen. Months went by where Josh and Stephen didn't speak to each other, but eventually Stephen got his way. He actually talked Josh into believing that it was actually Susan that led him on or came on to him. And Susan was just really upset that it seemed like her own husband, Josh, didn't even care about what happened. He's actually siding with his creepy father. Because this was a large cause of stress in the marriage, Susan and Josh decided it would be best to distance themselves from Stephen. In 2003, they move in with Josh's sister, Jennifer Graves, and this is in Utah. So they moved from Washington to Utah at this point. This was just temporary while they were looking for a house. So they both ended up landing temp jobs with Fidelity, and they started the house hunting process. They were actually approved for a mortgage, which is a good start, right? Susan excelled at her position, and Josh, surprise, surprise, ended up getting fired. So once again, Susan was left being the sole breadwinner for the two of them. Knowing that they were now down to one income, they, for some reason, still continued with buying the house in West Valley City, which is like 25 minutes from where I live. Like, this all happened so close to where I am right now. In 2005, Susan gave birth to their first son, Charlie. When she went into labor, Josh was too busy backing up his computer and asked her to call her parents to take her to the hospital. And then he showed up an hour later where he still just sat and continued to play on his computer. So finally, when the baby's almost here, Susan's over there in pain and he's just like doing whatever he wants to on the computer. Chuck Cox, who is Susan's dad, comes over, shuts his laptop and says, "You need to go be with Susan now." What a crappy person. I'm not sure how Chuck held back as long as he did. Fathers are usually pretty protective of their daughters, and it's obvious that he is not a loving husband to Susan. The couple had their second son, Braden, in 2007, and that same year, Josh filed for bankruptcy. Due to his problem with credit card purchases and school loans, they were deep in debt, and his debt was erased, but he continued to use Susan's credit to make purchases. He bought whatever he wanted, but he was very controlling over finances when it came to Susan. He would be the one to take her paychecks and deposit them. She had no control over her own money. She had a strict budget for grocery shopping and gas. When she returned from a shopping trip, she had to get on and list every item she bought and the price on a spreadsheet so that he could keep track of what she's purchasing. Josh also made Susan knit her own socks so she didn't have to buy them for the family, which is just freaking weird. If she wanted to go somewhere, she had to get permission from Josh before she could use the family minivan. And I'm not sure if it's because of this case or it's just a common problem in this area, but when I first moved to Utah, my doctor screened me for emotional abuse. She asked me if my husband controlled me or my finances, which is great that they do that because a lot of women may feel trapped in an abusive relationship, or worse yet, they think it's normal to be treated this way, and it's not. This is not okay. Susan told Josh she wasn't happy in their marriage and wanted to try counseling, which was short-lived. He went twice and quit. I'm not sure if this was Susan reaching out to an attorney and it was at his suggestion, or she felt threatened, but she created a video. But she starts with saying, "I'm covering all my bases, making sure that if something happens to me or my family, or all of us, that our assets are documented. I hope everything works out and we are all happy and live happily ever after as much as that's possible." If you watch this video, you can see the sarcasm in her face. She literally rolls her eyes when she's saying happily ever after. During this video she's pointing out everything that's Josh's. So computers, tons of different tools from Home Depot, RC toys, camcorders. And she says in the videos that these were all purchased on her credit within the past year. As she's walking around, she also points out to a hole in the wall, and she's like, "And that's where Josh got angry and punched it." While he didn't physically abuse Susan, he did have violent outbursts where he broke things and verbally abused her and the children. At this time, Susan was actually working at Wells Fargo Financial. She wrote a handwritten last will and testament. It read, "I have been having extreme marital stress for about 3 or 4 years now. For mine and my children's safety, I feel that I need to have a paper trail at work that would not be accessible to my husband. I want it documented somewhere that there is extreme turmoil in our marriage. He has threatened to skip the country and told me straight up if we divorced, there will be no lawyers, only a mediator, and I will ruin you. Your life will be over and the boys will grow up without a mom and a dad. If something happens to me, please talk to my sister-in-law, Jenny Graves, my friend, Kirsty Hallowell. Check my blogs on MySpace. Check my work desk. Talk to my friends, my coworkers, and family. It is an open fact that we have life insurance policies of over 1 million if we die in the next 4 years. Coworkers, family, and friends hear me say this occasionally. If I die, it might not be an accident, even if it looks like one. Take care of my boys. I want my parents, Judy and Chuck Cox, very involved and in charge of their lives. I love my boys. I live for them. And I choose not to cheat or do drugs because I don't want to risk losing them." She signs the bottom, and she adds a note for her boys. "I love you, Charlie and Braden, and I'm sorry you've seen how wrong and messed up our family is. I would never leave you." On the envelope, she wrote instructions for family and friends of Susan, all except Josh Powell, husband. I don't trust him. Josh Powell is not allowed to possess this. Susan, get out. What are you doing staying in this toxic home and marriage? You fear for your life. I mean, this letter sounds like you know you're going to die. Like, I don't understand what you're doing. But at the same time, I mean, how do you get out of this? Children are involved. If she just leaves and takes the kids, is that kidnapping? I guess she would have to get authorities involved and get custody of the boys to have a clean break. And Josh made it clear he would not let that happen. Josh had long lost his faith, but he did allow Susan to keep attending church and take the boys, which is surprising that he allowed her to do that. Sunday, December 6th, 2009, after attending church, a neighbor came over and Josh actually cooked for the family and made pancakes. And Josh never cooked. That's a woman's job. Afterwards, Susan told her friend that she wasn't feeling well and wanted to go lay down to rest. While Susan laid down, Josh took the boys out sledding, and that was the last anyone ever saw Susan. My opinion is that Josh drugged her food. The next morning, when the boys didn't show up at their in-home daycare, the caretaker called Susan and Josh, and there was no answer. After time went by, she got more concerned, and she called the emergency contact on the list, which was Josh's sister, Jennifer. Neither Josh or Susan's family had heard from them. Jennifer and her mother, Terry, rushed over to the Powell house. On the way, they called 911. They were worried that the whole family was trapped inside and maybe suffered from carbon monoxide poisoning or something. When the police arrived, no one was answering when they were banging on the doors. There was no response, so Terry gave the permission for the police to break a window. There was no one inside, but there were 2 box fans propped up, drying wet spots on the couch and the carpet. They also found Susan's purse, which had her ID and cell phone in the house, which was odd. I mean, if you're going to go somewhere, you take that stuff with you. So that was left behind. Red flag. Neither Josh or Susan showed up for work that day. Hours went by, and finally Josh comes rolling into town with Charlie and Braden in the family van. Police question him about where he's been, and wait till you hear this bullshit story. It is insanity. According to Josh, when he was done sledding the day before with the boys, Susan was asleep. At midnight, his 2- and 4-year-old decide they want s'mores. First of all, it's midnight. Tell your young children no and put them to bed like a normal adult. If you must make s'mores, there's a microwave. Melt melt the chocolate and the marshmallow, make them a little sandwich, or build a fire in your backyard. But Josh decides to drive 2 hours away to Simpson Springs Campground to make s'mores for the boys. And here's the kicker. This was during a freaking blizzard. I live in Utah. No one is out driving in the middle of the night in a blizzard. And no one is using a campground in December either. And how do you make a fire during a snowstorm? Anyways, according to Josh, they camped there for the night in the freezing cold. When police asked why he didn't call into work, he said it was because he thought today was Sunday, not Monday. Come on. Police have to see straight through this story. Police were dispatched to check the campground where Josh said he took the boys, and there was no sign of anyone camping there or that a fire had been made. He said Susan was on the couch when he left, and he has no idea where she is. Here is where I think the police messed up. They allowed Josh to go home and come back the next day for more questioning, which gave him plenty of time to clean the van. He stuck to his same stupid story that he took the boys camping in a blizzard. I've been camping in early spring, and it's uncomfortably cold at night. There is no way him and the boys camped in Utah in December without freezing. No one was buying his story, but there was no evidence that could point to Josh. An acquaintance reported that during casual conversation at an office party years earlier, Josh had bragged about how easy it would be to hide a body. He said he would put it in a mine shaft. If you knocked a little of the shaft loose, it would all come tumbling down, and no one would really want to travel down there because it's so unsafe, which I'm sure is exactly what he did. Police searched for Susan extensively in the mountains with no luck. Josh packs up Charlie and Braden and moves back to Puyallup, Washington with Stephen. Hold up. Why was he allowed to leave the state? He's the only person of interest in this disappearance that we all know is really a murder. So I just don't understand why he's allowed to leave Utah in this situation. Okay, Josh's brother Michael helped him make this move, and immediately afterwards he took his car, so Michael's car, to a salvage yard and sold it dirt cheap. I mean, like suspiciously cheap. So once this information was discovered, the car was found and searched. Dogs found the scent of a body from inside the trunk. So it's thought that Michael actually helped Josh get rid of Susan's body after she was killed. The boys, Charlie and Braden, they were too young to be formally interviewed by police because they were only 2 and 4 when this happened, but they did relay some damning information to teachers at school. Charlie drew a picture of the family van with everyone inside and said that his mommy went with them but didn't come back. And both boys had told other kids at school that their mother was dead. And it's just so sad. Like I said, they were only 2 and 4 when this happened, but they know what happened to their mother, and that's just heartbreaking. Ugh. Josh barely pretended to care about the disappearance of his wife. He created a social media page, which initially was to help find Susan, but it quickly turned into a platform to slander Susan. So Josh and Stephen teamed up. They started posting about how she was a seductress and a terrible person. They said she was having an affair with a local journalist, and they ran away together to Brazil. Yeah, Susan left with someone she had no connections with to another country without her purse or her ID. She just left her kids without even saying goodbye. The poor journalist went missing around the same time, so they just concocted this story just to try to take the heat off of Josh. Stephen got his hands on Susan's childhood journals. He allowed the media into his home to do an interview where he publicly read her journal entries from teenage years. He was trying to make her look like a little slut, but it's like, I don't know, read anyone's teenage journal. That's all they write about. Just want to take the suspicion away from Josh and try to turn this around into Susan's fault, which is not the case. Susan is the victim here. But this backfired on Stephen. His home was searched, uncovering over 4,000 images of Susan on his computer. Some were even of her using the bathroom and changing. And that is not the worst of it. They found tons of kiddie porn on his computer. So Stephen goes to prison where he belongs. Oddly enough, this was what allowed Charlie and Braden to finally be taken out of Josh's care. Josh was living with Stephen at the time, and this was not considered a safe environment for the children. So now they were in the care of Susan's parents, which Josh was super pissed about. The Cox family was very religious, and he did not want his children being influenced by them and the LDS faith. He fought for his paternal rights. So through this process, Josh had to be evaluated thoroughly, which they found some interesting things on his computer too. They found pictures, but they're not real pictures taken with a camera, but more like hand drawings or cartoons. But they were of child pornography, bestiality, and incest. But because these weren't real photos, nothing was illegal about it, which is unreal. He had to have a psychosexual evaluation done and somehow was still granted supervised visits with his sons. Why? Josh and the Cox family had many disputes and restraining orders were placed on each other, which meant that a social worker had to take the boys to and from the visitations. So typically, you're supposed to have these visitations at a third-party location, but for some stupid, unknown reason, the system really failed here. They allowed these visitations to happen at Josh's home. And this is where the story gets really dark. February 5th, 2012, the boys had a scheduled visitation with Josh. They arrive and jump out of the car. They're excited to see their dad. He yells, "Boys, I have a surprise for you." And the social worker was lagging a little bit behind, and the boys run inside. As she approaches the door, Josh gives her a shitty grin and slams the door in her face and locks it. She is stunned and realizes she smells gas. She immediately calls 911. I'm going to play this 911 call for you, and I hope to God this dispatcher got fired because he really freaking sucks at his job.
Hey, I'm on a supervised visitation for a court-ordered visit, and something really weird has happened. The kids went into the house, and the parent, the biological parent, whose name is Josh Powell, will not let me in the door. What should I do? What's the address? It's 8119, and I think it's 89th. I don't know what the address is. It's pretty important for me to know.
Okay, first of all, I feel like he's given her attitude, and it's like, if she's calling from a cell phone, this is, 2012? Can't they ping her cell phone and know where they are and get emergency people on the way, like ASAP? I feel like you're supposed to take every call coming in like it is an actual emergency, and he has given this woman a really hard time. So let's continue.
Sorry, I can't. Just a minute. Let me get in my car and see if I can find it. Nothing like this has ever happened before at these visitations, so I'm really shocked. And I could hear one of the kids crying, but he still wouldn't let me in. Okay, it is. You can't find me by GPS. No. But I think I need help right away. He's on a very short lease with CSHS, and CPS has been involved. And this is the craziest thing. He looked right at me and closed the door. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just waiting to know where you are.
Okay. It's 8119 189th Street, Court East, Puyallup, 98375. And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline and he won't let me in.
You want to pull out of the driveway because you smell gasoline, but he won't let you...
He won't let me in.
He won't let you out of the driveway?
He won't let me in the house.
Whose house is it?
He's got the kids in the house and he won't let me in. It's a supervised visit.
I understand. Whose house is it?
Josh Powell.
Okay, so you don't live there, right?
No, I don't. No, I'm contracted to the state to provide supervised visitation.
I see. Okay. And who is there to exercise their visitation?
I am. And the visit is with Josh Powell.
And who's
And he is the husband that I supervise.
So you supervise and you're doing the visit?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like this dude, what does he not understand? So the house is Josh Powell's. She is there for a supervised visit. He shut the door in her face, won't let her in, and she smells gas. Like, pretty self-explanatory. It's like he's trying to make things more complicated than they are.
Supervise yourself?
I supervise myself. I'm the supervisor here.
Wait a minute. If it's a supervised visit, you can't supervise yourself. If you're the
I can
visitor.
supervise myself. I'm the supervisor for the supervised visit.
Okay, well, aren't you the one making the visit? Or is there another
I'm the
parent
one.
that you're supervising?
No. I'm the one that supervises. I pick up the kids as their grandparent.
Yes. And then who visits with the children?
Josh Powell.
Okay, so you're supposed to be there to supervise Josh Powell's visit with the children.
Yes, that's correct.
This
This is a high-profile case.
how did he gain access to the children before you got there?
I was one step in back of them.
Okay, so they went into the house and then he locked you out.
Yes, he shut the door right in my face.
All right, now it's clear. Your last name?
My name is Elizabeth Griffin Hall.
Griffin Hall is hyphenated?
Griffin Hall is hyphenated. Is he freaking serious? This is an emergency. Send emergency services. Not important if there's a freaking hyphen in her name.
And the kids have been in there by now approximately 10 minutes. And he knows this is a supervised visit. 2. Braden is 5 and Charlie is 7.
And the dad's last name?
Powell, Powell. L.
2 L's at the end of Powell?
Yes.
His first name?
His first name is Josh.
His name is Josh Powell. High profile case. Are you not freaking listening?
Did you notice what he was wearing?
No, I didn't notice what he was wearing.
Is he alone then, or is anybody?
I don't know. I couldn't get in the house.
Are you in a vehicle now or on foot?
I'm in a vehicle. I'm in a Prius, a 2010 Prius,
What color
with
is
the doors locked. But he hasn't opened the door.
Ma'am.
I rang the doorbell and everything.
What color
I
is it?
begged him to let me in.
Elizabeth, please listen to my questions. What color is the Toyota Prius?
Forget the actual emergency that's happening inside. What color is your Prius, Elizabeth?
All right, we'll have somebody look for you there.
Okay, how long will it be?
I don't know, ma'am. They have to respond to emergency, life-threatening situations first.
Did he seriously just say that? Serious life-threatening emergencies first. She smells gas. He has locked the children inside. This is life-threatening.
Available deputy.
Well, this could be life-threatening. He went to court on Wednesday, and he didn't get his kids back. And this is really, I'm afraid for their lives.
Okay, has he threatened the lives of the children previously?
I have no idea.
All right, we'll have the first available deputy contact you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so I am under the understanding when you call 911, you tell them there's an emergency, they send someone ASAP to come help you, and they stay on the line with you to make sure everything's okay until help arrives. Like, what is happening right here? This call blows my freaking mind when I hear it, and it makes me so angry. I feel like this man is partially responsible for what happened. I mean, obviously he didn't kill Charlie and Braden, but he could have helped prevent it if he actually sent help ASAP. Instead, he downplayed the situation and acted like this wasn't even a problem. The first available deputy will get to you as soon as they can. Like, just freaking ridiculous. Okay, so Elizabeth, the social worker, pulls away from the house because she feels unsafe. And just then, there's an explosion. Josh and the boys are all inside. Once the emergency services do get there and they have the fire put out, the bodies were examined, and they can tell that the boys had hatchet marks on them. So Josh had attempted to kill them prior to the explosion, probably in thinking that was the more humane thing to do when killing your child. It just sounds really weird saying that. But he failed. He didn't kill them with the hatchet blows. The boys actually died of smoke inhalation, so they died in the fire. Josh had sent all his family members suicide emails. A year later, Josh's brother Michael, the one who probably helped him get rid of Susan's body, he jumps off of a 7-story parking garage. No note or anything like that, but I would say that the guilt was eating at him because obviously he played a role in this with Josh. And Josh also never admitted to anything in his suicide notes. It wasn't anything an admission of guilt of killing or part of the disappearance of Susan. It was just a suicide letter. This is just such a horrific story, and unfortunately Susan is still considered a missing person and probably will never be found. I just hope she has reunited with her boys. There's a special place in hell for Josh Powell. Oh, and Stephen too, because he ended up dying of natural causes after he was released from prison. So there is an entire podcast series on this case. It is called Cold. It is hosted by a local investigative reporter named Dave Cawley. And I pulled most of the quotes and diary entries from this podcast. It has a lot of detailed information, so it is definitely worth a listen if this case interests you. Other than that, good old Wikipedia was a lot of help with this week's research. You can send me story suggestions. Love to hear them. killerstoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Killer Stories Podcast. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this has been a Killer Story.